Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you calling in for the first time and those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. Ordinarily, we like to move quickly through these calls. I want to apologize in advance. I don't feel as though I'm as prepared as I ordinarily am. As a matter of fact, you can probably detect that my voice is a little hoarse because I've been on the phone talking to a lot of people all over the planet. There's a lot going on. I'm going to try to distill the information I have as succinctly as possible. But I've got little stickums and notepads everywhere because stuff's coming to me from all directions, and that's above and beyond the service call for existing clients with those that possess our trust and the number of individuals contacting us on a daily basis to establish a trust. So I'm going to wander through all of this information. I hope you're going to be able to distill it for yourself because it's coming from a lot of directions. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to try to break this down and just talk about topics one by one. It's the only way I think I can get through all of this. So first I want to start with the meetings that Prime Minister al-Sudani of Iraq has been having over the last few weeks. They're ongoing meetings. There are meetings this week. There's going to be meetings next week. First, I want to mention the fact that there have been, I think we're on our third meeting with the Federal Reserve Bank and the U.S. Treasury, but them and the CBI of Iraq and Sudani himself. Then there are ongoing meetings with the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the Arab Monetary Fund, and even J.P. Morgan. We also have the United States, China, Russia, EU nations, and Middle East nations all vying for appointments with the CBI of Iraq and Sudani. Now, there would absolutely be no reason for any of these meetings to take place. These are international meetings. These don't have to do with in-country issues. This has to do with trade, import, export, international investment in Iraq, all of that. None of these meetings make any sense if Iraq remains in a program rate. That's basic economics 101. Now, the interesting meeting for me out of all of these was the one with J.P. Morgan. Evidently, J.P. Morgan is going to handle the balance of payments with regard to trade issues between Iraq and China. Now, this is very important because what the Iraqis did was they chose an American firm to basically be the intermediary between trades with China and Iraq. To me, what this means is that they're not completely trusting of China, and that should be the case if it's not. China has not been has not been dealing in trade matters fairly. For decades, they've been artificially devaluing their currency in order to corner a lot of the international trade. The United States itself had, $500 billion trade deficits annually prior to Trump coming into office, and now that he's gone, the trade deficit's increasing once again. Then, of course, we have the balloon issue, which is occurring now. We know it's occurring all over the place. So China is just not a good player, and in order to do business with them, Iraq decided that they're going to utilize an American banking and investment firm to handle all balance of trade issues. So that's important too. People also have to remember that the United States still has a right of refusal arrangement with Iraq, meaning as part of the liberation of Iraq, the United States has the option to have first rights for all kinds of international contracts in the country. So the United States is clearly working with Iraq at this point because the monetary and economic reforms are actually going to be helpful for the United States on for a lot of reasons, and I'll get into that in a little while. I wanted to touch on the process of the deletion of the zeros, because this creates a lot of confusion. Also, the difference between a LOP and a redenomination of a currency. A LOP really is slang for a redenomination. In the end, it's essentially the same thing, because mathematically, if you knock 3 zeros off, you're changing the denomination. Now, some refer to the 3 zeros as eliminating 3 of the zeros in the number of dinar needed to exchange for a U.S. dollar. 3 zeros can just as easily apply to the reduction of the 3 zeros from the provisional currency. So we refer to the deletion of the zeros, but we could also refer to it as the collection of the zeros, the collection of the provisional 3-0 dinar. So what that would mean is that a 25 dinar note, the new dinar note, would have the same value as an old provisional 3-0 25,000 dinar note, because the 3 zeros would be gone. Now again, that would affect an Iraqi national. The deletion of those 3 zeros, or that LOP, or whatever you want to call it, would not affect us, because again, as part of the liberation process, those that invested in the fledgling nation state of Iraq would be able to participate in the reinstitution and revaluation of their currency by exchanging the currency. Now, in the past, this was reserved for banks, that is central banks, hedge funds, certain VIPs, but pursuant to Executive Order 13303, an American citizen, a private citizen, can purchase the provisional 3-0 currency, and then when the currency reinstitutes and revaluates, hopefully to a Basel IV compliant value, we're going to be able to exchange it for its true value, which should be north of $3, possibly north of $4. But we'll see how that plays out. The other issue is what happens when we go to the bank, exchange our currency, and let's just say for simplicity's sake it's $3. So we go to the bank, we have 1 million dinar, we exchange it for 3 million USD, and that U.S. bank is now holding 1 million dinar. Well, that gets sent to the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department then either destroys that currency or digitally transfers it to Iraq, and then the United States has that currency now worth $3 American, purchase contracts to purchase oil. Oil, for example, we have contracts to purchase oil at $32 a barrel. Now, when the price of a barrel of oil was extremely low, that didn't do much for us. But at this present time, I guess the price of a barrel, I haven't looked recently, is approximately $70 a barrel. We can buy it for $32 a barrel, and that's especially important for the United States since we seem to have an administration that wants to spend down our reserves, and by stopping the production of oil in this country has actually pushed up the global price of a barrel substantially. So this is one way we can at least recover some of that by being able to purchase oil at $32 a barrel. What we probably should do is purchase as much oil as we can at $32 a barrel to replenish our oil reserves. However, this administration has a different agenda, and in my opinion, it's not pro-American. So I'll just leave it at that. But there's a lot of other things going on too. And I guess before I get into this, first let me state where I think we're going with the dinar and the budget. There's been a lot of talk that the budget's being held up until they change the exchange rate, at least go to 1-to-1. In my view, the budget and the exchange rate are on separate tracks. And the reason I say that is because just look at the past year. They passed the budget a year ago. Actually, it wasn't even a year ago. But in past budgets, when they passed the budget, we've seen the rate fluctuate over the last year. We've seen the dinar go from, or at least the last couple of years, go from 1190 to 1450 to 1600 to 1750. Now it's back down to 1300. That's a big jump from 1750 in a short period of time. So the dinar is clearly moving in the right direction vis-a-vis the U.S. dollar. I think that's going to continue. As a matter of fact, what I think is going to happen is we're probably going to see a drop to 1190. At that point, we could see a drop maybe to 1,000, and from there we could go even directly to 1-to-1. And at that point, 1-to-1 in country, then of course you're going to see the dinar float internationally, and that's where we're looking at $3 to $4 for the dinar. That's when we go to the bank to do our exchange. But let's talk a little bit about the monetary and economic reforms, sometimes referred to as articles, sometimes referred to as packages. They're divided, but to me, they kind of overlap one another. So while the monetary reform primarily in terms of reforms in the country were taking place, the economic reforms more in the near future, but they still kind of overlap. And let's talk about what I'm referring to, because I put them all sort of in one file. We're talking about an end of the auctions and a reform of the exchange centers that were exchanging USD for dinar. We're also talking about the implementation of their e-banking and e-commerce. Now, these three things, of course, are necessary steps in order for the dinar finally to reinstitute and revalue globally. They need all of this done. But the number one problem remained the intrusion and interference of Iran that has been using Iraq as its little piggy bank before and even after the U.S. sanctions. As a matter of fact, after the U.S. sanctions, Iran even got its fingers deeper into the back pocket of Iraq in order to fund itself. But what these reforms do, i.e. ending the auctions, reform of the exchange centers, and implementing all the e-banking and e-commerce, it basically eradicates the Iranian interference and corruption. It's going to end the counterfeiting. It's going to end the money laundering and the smuggling. It's going to end the customs tax evasion. And it's even going to end terrorism to the extent that Iran will not have the money, because Iran is still the largest sponsor of state terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism. But there's actually even something else which is much more important, and this is another reason why the Middle East nations are heavily involved in Iraq. If Iran's nefarious activities are defunded, they will not be able to fund the Palestinians that are fighting a proxy war with Israel, because they want to end the nation state of Israel. So by defunding Iran's nefarious activities, they're drying up the funds that they were giving to the Palestinians to fund their war against Israel. So ironically, what's happening is that the reinstitution of the dinar, along with a lot of other factors, it's a catalyst for a lot of the peaceful negotiations going on in the Middle East. And of course, then we have the Arab Monetary Fund that very much wants the Iraqi dinar in its basket. So while it wasn't directly the intention, one of the very good intentions or solutions, conclusions of all of this is a genuine possibility for peace in the Middle East. The other issue for Iran is this. If Iran cannot pilfer U.S. dollars, Iran's going to need to revalue its own currency. Well, in order to be Article 8 compliant with the UN, it's one of the requirements. They cannot be involved in the affairs of neighboring countries. So there are a lot of reasons above and beyond simple economics that's pushing for the return of full Iraqi sovereignty and the reinstitution and revaluation of its currency globally. So having said all this, what does this mean to me? It means that we're going to see over the next few weeks and possibly months is the continued increase of the Iraqi dinar against the U.S. dollar, and then one day we will wake up and see that the reinstitution will be the Iraqi dinar either at 1-to-1 with the U.S. dollar or a slight premium over the U.S. dollar in order to ensure that the Iraqi citizens will be purchasing goods and services with their own currency and not relying on the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency with higher purchasing power. Once that happens, it's probably only a matter of weeks for the dinar to then revalue globally. That's when we go to the banks. Now, the dinar, I believe, was $3.22 when it went to a program rate. Since that happened, we've seen a global shift to Basel compliance. What is Basel? Basel is a 5-phase system, Basel 1 through Basel 5, where we are going to be moving away from fiat-based currencies, that is, currencies value based solely on the faith and credit of the government, to being backed. And again, there are 5 phases. We're entering Basel 4. And what this means is that the currencies are going to have to be backed by the known reserves in a given country and their ability to bring those reserves to market. But what this really does, it creates a global equilibrium. It means that there's going to be a general method of valuing currencies internationally instead of the manipulations that central banks of the various countries use. So nefarious countries like Iran are not going to be able to pilfer because there's not going to be a great disparity in the value of the currencies. Countries like China, who in return for being allowed to enter the World Trade Organization, sponsored of all countries by the United States, thanked us by artificially devaluing their currency in order to corner the market. All of that is going to stop. So there's a lot riding on this above and beyond the currencies. But the reason I point all this out is because these are the reasons that the dinar will have to revalue. The nation, for a number of reasons, and I've gone into this, let me summarize it basically. In my opinion, Iraq may be, if not the richest, certainly one of the richest countries per square mile in the world. They've got an embarrassment of natural resources. Geopolitically, their location's critical. It's the wedge between the Sunni of the Saudi Arabia and the Shia of Iran. It's the gateway between the East and the West, which is critical for the China initiative, reinstituting the old China trade route, going all the way back to Marco Polo. So there's a lot going on. Iraq seems to be the sweet spot for everything, and we're moving in the right direction. Now, we've been discussing the Iraqi dinar for over a decade, we at Trust Unlimited, and we knew that the average American, hardworking middle-class American, was simply going to be unprepared for literally this overnight wealth, because what's going to happen very shortly, in my opinion, in Iraq has never happened to this magnitude before, and it's never going to happen again. Those of you that listen to our calls know we were involved with the reinstitution of the Kuwaiti dinar in the early 90s. We purchased the Kuwaiti dinar for 15 cents, exchanged it for $3.46. Now we're looking at a currency that many of us purchased, the Iraqi dinar, for 1/1500th of a penny, and it could come back to anywhere from 322 to my opinion, and one of the estimates was $4.85. But even at 322, it wasn't 15 cents to 322. It was 1/1500th of a penny to 322. So we're talking about just a huge windfall profit. And we knew that most Dinarians were just not going to be in a position to manage that. So we decided to put a program in place to assist you. It's a two-phased program. Phase 1 is pre-RV. Phase 2 is post-RV. Pre-RV involves the establishment of what we refer to as a pre-RV family of asset protection trusts. Post-RV involves all of the product, services, and professional referrals that will be made available to you after the revaluation of the dinar. Just mention something real quick. I'll get into it in more detail in a minute. But we're looking at the beginning of the process to transition away from a hard currency to a digital currency. That's very bad news for us, because what that is possession and control of our currency by the United States Treasury. So one of the things that we're going to need to discuss post-RV is how to operate outside of that system. There are legal ways that you can minimize your exposure to the central bank digital currency, operate within our system, and protect your wealth, and we can get into that as well. So let's start with phase 1, which is the establishment of your pre-RV package of asset protection trusts. Now, there are a number of entities individuals can establish in order to provide some level of asset protection. For example, you can establish LLCs and sub-S corporations. Now, they do provide some level of asset protection, but primarily by dividing personal assets from business assets. Now, the problem for us is that the possession of these currencies, the dinar and these other currencies, is a personal asset. Second, we know that courts have ruled that LLCs or sub-S corporations that are owned in the majority by an individual or a closely held group can be pierced for civil litigation. So the LLC and the sub-S corporation is not going to work for us. Some individuals have established revocable trusts, sometimes referred to as living or loving trusts. Now, these trusts certainly provide some level of asset protection, but they're designed primarily as statutory trusts to exempt your estate from the cost and delay of probate, and if properly structured, can substantially reduce and even eliminate the federal estate tax. But they provide little or no protection in terms of privacy or asset protection, because while the assets are not owned by you, they're owned by the trust. The information housed within that trust can be accessed by anyone that wants that information. So there is no privacy or asset protection. Now, some individuals have established individual irrevocable trusts, and they certainly provide more protection than the LLC, sub-S corporation, or revocable trust. But there is an inherent flaw in the individual irrevocable trust, and it's this. If any asset within that trust gets involved in civil litigation, that would necessarily drag all of your other assets and net worth into that litigation as well, because all of your assets are owned by that one individual trust. The solution is to create a package of irrevocable trusts, and I'll explain how that works. Now, we've marketed this trust for our Dinarians. It's a trust that we've utilized for anyone that possesses an asset that they think is going to increase substantially in wealth. People have land contracts. They have a tract of land that there's been rezoning, and all of a sudden that tract of land is worth 10 times as much. In the case of these currencies, you purchase them at a substantial discount, expecting a substantial return when they reinstitute, and it looks like that's going to be happening in the very near future. But what this trust package does, it provides the best bulletproof asset protection available in the United States of America. I'm going to explain to you how that works. First, in terms of those of us that have currencies, and then why, under our current situation, any American citizen needs to establish this trust package to protect themselves. Now, first, this trust package will provide you with privacy and anonymity. That's because the assets within the trust package are sealed, meaning that the general public will have no knowledge of your possessions or your actual net worth. Now, this is important for a number of reasons. Whether you're a dinarian who in the very near future will probably be a millionaire, or whether you're an individual that's already a millionaire. If you have a net worth in excess of $2.5 million, there's a 1 in 4 chance that you will be sued over your lifetime, because civil suits are about money. People know that you have money. But when your assets are in trust, they don't really know what you possess. Makes it much more difficult for an individual to sue you. The other issue is this. Of those lawsuits, 40%, approximately 40% of lawsuits are what's classified as nuisance lawsuits, basically meaning that these individuals probably don't have a really strong case, but they've calculated that that's going to cost you a lot of money to hire an attorney to respond to their court filings. So their hope is that you're just going to pay them a little money to go away. Now, when assets are in trust and they have no knowledge of what you actually possess, where the assets are, what's involved in collecting, nuisance lawsuits go away, because in a situation like that, the plaintiff filing the nuisance lawsuit is going to have to pay the attorney a upfront retainer. The attorney's not going to be working on a contingency, so there will be no lawsuit. Second issue for dinarians is that by establishing this trust and assigning your currencies, pre-RV currencies, to the trust, you're going to avoid personal IRS scrutiny. If you are holding these currencies in direct title when they revalue, the IRS computers will probably spit out an audit. And with the magnitude of this revaluation relative to your prior year's earnings, you very well are looking at a full-blown 6-year audit. Now, such an audit would be time-consuming. It would certainly be frustrating, because it's come along at the time that these currencies have revalued, and there's many other things you'd much rather be spending your time doing than dealing with an IRS audit. And third, the cost of our asset protection trust package would be less than the cost of such an audit. The other issue is this. If your trust is in force and your currencies have been assigned to that trust, there's less than a 15% chance of an IRS audit, because the IRS tends to avoid sophisticated trusts because they rightly assume you have sophisticated legal assistance, and they're much more interested in the low-hanging fruit. Second, even if the IRS determines to audit your trust, they can't do a 6-year audit. Why? Because the only taxable event within the trust will be the revaluation itself. The third reason you should establish this trust package is if you plan on gifting currencies to family and friends in certain situations. Now, philanthropic gifting can always be done on a tax-preferred basis, either pre- or post-RV. But in order to avoid a substantial 40% gift tax, you're going to need to give currencies prior to the revaluation. Now, if you're gifting to individuals that you have no problem either giving them the currency to exchange for themselves or giving them the USD after you've negotiated the exchange, that can be done outside of the trust with a standard gift letter. But if you are hesitant for any reason to give these individuals the post-RV lump sum, then you can gift it to them through our specially designed gift subtrust. And because you're making the pre-RV gift through the subtrust, you will have avoided the federal gift tax. You will negotiate the exchange. Then you will be able to manage, invest, and distribute the money to them post-RV as you deem appropriate. And this is important for a number of reasons. Sometimes you have minors. Sometimes you have individuals that have disabilities. Sometimes you have individuals that are extremely irresponsible and you know you can't give them a large sum. Unfortunately, some of us have children that have other legal issues, and you're going to need to protect that wealth by placing it in the gift subtrust and then distributing it to them as necessary. Now, the fourth reason you'd want to establish this trust is because it's been structured in such a way as to allow your estate to bypass the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax. I'll give you two quick scenarios. Scenario number one, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs an estate of $25 million. Now, that estate must now go through probate, a process that ordinarily can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. But probate is a public disclosure process, meaning that the general public will be aware of the size of your estate, who your heirs are, and how much they each stand to inherit. So if anyone feels they have a legitimate claim against you, your estate, or your heirs, they could simply file that claim with the probate court. And that could tie the estate up for years, and in some cases even decades. And your heirs will have either limited access or no access at all to their respective inheritance until the probate process is completed. Then there's something called the federal estate tax. This is the tax that the federal government would assess in order for that estate to be transferred to heirs. Under current law, approximately $10 million of that $25 million estate would bypass any federal estate tax, but the balance could be taxed as much as 65%. Now, this scenario is not only unacceptable, it's completely and totally avoidable. How? Scenario number two, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, you assign those currencies on paper to our Family Asset Protection Trust package. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs that very same estate of $25 million, but this time protected in our Asset Protection Trust package. As a result, there will be no probate. There will be no public disclosure of your estate. Your heirs will have immediate access to their respective inheritance, and the federal estate tax will be zero, saving your heirs as much as 55% of their inheritance. The fifth reason you'd want to establish this trust package is for some very specific asset protection benefits. One pre-RV, one post-RV. Pre-RV, this trust package will allow you to circumvent something called the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act. Now, what does that mean? Under our system of civil procedure, you can only be sued for what you actually own in title or the value of property at the time you transfer it out of title to an entity like our trust package. So let's take the previous example from before. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000, transfer the currencies to our trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. You begin to live a lifestyle more reflective of your newfound wealth. And a couple of years down the road, someone sees that you're living rather comfortably and decides for whatever reason that they're going to sue you. Well, this prospective plaintiff has a couple of problems. First, he or she better have a very strong case and very deep pockets, because this trust is structured in such a way as to make it extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming to pursue civil litigation. But second and most importantly, once any prospective plaintiff learns that pursuant to the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, the only thing they could sue you for would be the value of the currencies or that property at the time you transferred it out of title, i.e. $5,000, and none of the post-RV value of $25 million, there will be no lawsuit. Post-RV, there's a benefit I like to refer to as limited liability stop-loss. This protects you from future bad acts after you've acquired this wealth. This protection is accomplished through a legal strategy called segregation of assets. This is why we've established a family package of trusts. This is the best asset protection available, and I'll give you an example of how this would work. Once again, we'll use the same example. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The currencies revalue for $25 million. Now that you've got $25 million in trust, you decide to make some purchases. So you purchase a larger primary residence, a vacation home, perhaps a half a dozen rental properties for tax write-off and additional cash flow, a couple of cars, a boat, and let's say an RV. But as you purchase these items, you place each of them in their own separate sub-trust to be managed by your master trust, the initial trust that you established pre-RV to hold your assigned currencies. Now, how does this protect you from future bad acts? Well, let's say one day you're driving one of your new cars, you have an accident, the accident is clearly your fault, and tragically someone is seriously injured or even killed. Well, the family of the victim is going to want to sue you. But remember, civil suits are about monetary awards, and you don't legally own anything. So the plaintiffs would be left to sue the owner of the car that you were driving. Well, who owns that car? One of your sub-trusts, of which you are merely the beneficiary. Well, what's in that sub-trust? Merely that one car and the car insurance policy. In that scenario, the car insurance carrier will negotiate an out-of-court settlement with the victim's family. You will not be involved in those rather unpleasant negotiations. The car insurance carrier will repair or replace your car, making you whole, and this is important, all of your other assets are safely protected in the other sub-trusts. Why? Because under the law, those separate sub-trusts are separate legal entities having nothing whatsoever to do with the accident in question. Therefore, the plaintiff would have no standing to pursue those separate legal entities. So your family package of trusts work very much the way a commercial barge works, where all of the valuable cargo is stored in a series of small compartments. Why? In the event that any compartment is ever breached, the only potential loss would be the cargo in that one compartment. The cargo in the other compartments is safe and secure due to the firewalls, and the barge will never sink. Now, these benefits are lost to you if you do not establish your trust package prior to the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. Now, as I've said before, we're broadening our horizons a little bit because given the current government and administration in the United States, this trust package is going to be an indispensable tool to protect your wealth, not only your privacy, not only protect you from civil litigation, but protect you from the federal government from excessive taxation. By putting all of your assets in these trusts, there are going to be certain tax advantages you will not enjoy outside of a trust. In addition, we're going to need to try to operate outside of the central bank digital currency system. Now, how do we do that? There are a number of ways we can do that. We can invest in metals, That's precious and industrial metals. We can invest in certain funds that invest in, for example, mining companies. We can invest in something called a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. In essence, we're making sure that our principal is not in the bank or not in securities, financial assets, but is in tangible assets that throw off substantial dividends. Now, it is true that the dividends would be in the central bank digital currency system, but the principal, we're talking about 90 to 95% of your wealth will be outside of the central bank digital currency system and will be in trust. And this is the best single thing that you can do, not only as a Dinarian, but as an American citizen, to protect your wealth from civil litigation, protect your wealth from governmental control and confiscation. Now, our trust package is initially a package of 10 trusts consisting of one master trust that will hold your current pre-RV currencies, free RV, and financial assets like bank accounts and investment accounts post-RV. One gift sub-trust if you are gifting currencies to family and friends and wish to control and manage that post-RV USD payoff, but which sub-trust can be converted to a standard sub-trust at any time, and then 8 additional standard sub-trusts to hold assets like homes, cars, boats, etc. Now, this was the simplification of a rather sophisticated trust package that we've utilized for our more affluent clients in the past, but in our opinion, just about every American with a net worth of, let's say, $1 million or more should establish such a trust to protect themselves. This trust had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But over a decade ago, when we decided to work with Dinarians, we knew that the price tag for that trust would be just unaffordable for too many. So we simplified the package, and by doing so, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. Now, there are several ways you can pay for that. If you pay us up front, we'll discount the price further to $2,500, which is, of course, will save you $500. If that's not possible, we do have a deferred payment arrangement. You'd make an initial payment of $525, which sum would basically offset our cost just to produce and deliver your trust package to you. The balance of the $3,000 would then be paid in $100 monthly installments. We will charge no interest. The only proviso is once the reevaluation of the Iraqi dinar occurs, any unpaid balance would need to be paid within 30 days. So with the deferred payment arrangement, anyone that has currencies and understands the need for getting their affairs in order and their trust in place should be in a position to afford to do so. One other suggestion, we do accept credit cards. Pay us up front with a credit card. Not only will you get the $500 discount, but the minimum payment on your card would be substantially less than the $100 a month you'd pay under a deferred payment arrangement. But we will work with you in whatever method works best for you. Our objective is to help you get your affairs in order, your trust in force, and your currencies assigned to that trust prior to the revaluation of the dinar and some of these other currencies for all of the reasons that we've discussed here. Now, we will be going to a Q&A in a moment, but before we do, and for the benefit of our newer callers, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Trust Unlimited and why you should seriously consider contacting us to get our initial no-obligation package. Now, that package does contain everything you need if you decide to apply for one of our family asset protection trust packages. But again, you're under no obligation to do so. You can review the package. Has a lot of information about us, about the currencies, about trusts. Contact us by phone or email if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you. There will be no consultation fee. If you then decide to proceed, you would then submit your application and the payment for the trust. You should have your trust within 5 working days. But before we go to our Q&A again, I want to tell you a little bit about Trust Unlimited and why it's probably a good idea, whether you're a Dinarian or just an American citizen that's very dissatisfied with the state of affairs in this country right now. Our trust package was authored by our attorney, Robert Bly. He's been a practicing attorney for over 40 years, specializing in the areas of asset protection, estate planning, and offshore planning. I myself hold degrees in political science, macroeconomics, and finance. I've worked in these areas for nearly 40 years. I, along with my clients, were personally involved in the reinstatement of the Kuwaiti dinar in the early 90s. So between the two of us, Robert Bly and I have literally 80 years' experience working precisely in these areas, and I frankly know of no firm that can make that claim. Now, under our system of civil procedure, it's when you hold assets in direct title that you can lose control of them. And it's invariably at certain times in life that you really need control that things can go south on you. If you've lived for any length of time, you've either experienced in your own life or through friends and family things like unexpected divorce, permanent incapacitation, the onset of dementia, premature death and prolonged and complicated probate processes. Then there are substantial investment losses and business losses, even bankruptcies. The number 2 loss of wealth now in the aggregate, courtesy of the information age, is identity theft. But the number 1 loss of personal wealth remains confiscation through civil litigation. Anything you own in direct title can be taken from you. And this is why you have to ensure that when the dinar and these other currencies revalue globally, they've been protected in your family asset protection trust and are not owned by you in direct title. Because the only way that you can manage, protect, and control everything and in all times and in all circumstances is through the establishment of a package of asset protection trusts, and particularly if you have an asset like these currencies that you're anticipating a substantial increase in value. And we at Trust Unlimited will do everything we can to help you accomplish your personal and financial objectives, both pre- and post-RV, as we understand them. So thanks so much for listening. I'm going to go to the Q&A here, and then I'll give you our contact information. And while I'm waiting for any potential questions, I want to give you our contact information. If the things we've discussed here today are of interest and concern to you, I strongly suggest you contact us to get our initial no-obligation package. Again, it does contain everything you need if you wish to proceed, but you're under no obligation to do so. We'll be happy to assist you if you have any questions, and there will be no consultation fee. You can go to our website, which is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc.com. You can contact us by phone or email if you wish for us to send you one of our initial packages. Our email is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc@gmail.com. And our phone service is 307-274-4122. So let's go to the Q&A here. Our first question is area code 509. That's 509. Go ahead.
Jim, hello. This is Art Taylor. How are you doing, my friend?
How are you doing, Art? I think you and I just had a little back and forth with emails, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And, as you know, we have an established trust with another company. And I've established a trust. Say again?
I said, I forgive you, my child.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I love you, man. Yeah, exactly. Well, the good news is, as you may recall, we established a trust for my sister with Trust Unlimited, and my wife and I are trustees for that. So that's, I followed Trust Unlimited for years, and then Ray Brooks split, and I went over to that company and listened, and we ended up getting a trust with them. Now, everything that you just about everything that you profess, if you will, or educate people with continued legal education with asset trusts, it kind of puts everything that we have that we've been instructed to do on our head. You know, for example, you had mentioned in the last letter or email that you do not recommend establishing as trust bank accounts prior to the RV for a number of reasons. That's completely contrary to what we were told, and so our trust we've established bank account trusts with Wells and a home credit union, and also with for my sister as well, because we've kind of following the guidelines that the other company had, trust company had given us. So how do we? I know the best thing that we can do, presumably, is establish a trust shortly with you folks. And we had planned on doing that after the RV, but it appears in our discussions that that will create complications, even being able to transfer directly, proceeds from one trust to another trust to bring it, in line, if you will. So with that first main question, actually, that hadn't been really addressed prior to you sending the email in regards to establishing a trust with bank account with a particular bank. How would you, at the RV, with your assigned currencies to the trust, but not having a bank account for the trust, how would you facilitate?
Okay. All right. Now, if you had purchased a trust through the firm as I represented, one of the documents, supplemental documents you would have gotten along with your trust package is something called the exchange protocol if you have a trust. And it walks through the way this is being done. But one of the primary things when you're dealing with a bank, remember, a bank's job is to collect capital, period, end of sentence. They don't care about anything else. So our objective is for our client to walk into the bank and say, I have a 10 million dinar, and those dinar are assigned to my trust. And this is a completely unfunded trust. There are no assets in the trust. There are no bank accounts or investment accounts anywhere. It is an empty, blank trust. What we want to do is negotiate our exchange and have the USD go into a trust bank account established today at this bank. When you have assets in the trust, if you funded sub-trust, you have accounts at other banks, they're going to want that information. I'm not saying it's a deal breaker. I'm saying it's a complication.
Okay. So, because when we established the asset bank account for trust, it was a process at the bank, and we had to basically walk the bank through the steps, utilizing the particular pages that were in the trust that were dealing with it. They had no idea how to establish a trust.
They had no idea about it. Yeah.
No. In fact, the first time we did with Wells Fargo, I walked them through step by step based on the guidance that we had received from that particular other trust company.
Let me say something about Wells.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when you say Wells Fargo and I have a real sore spot. I mean, I could tell you stories that I've gone through with Wells Fargo over the years. I'll just give you the short version. I had a vice president of Wells Fargo that had to be escorted to his car at 5 o'clock every night because I was in the parking lot waiting for him. Okay? So I got Wells Fargo. Now, when I came with the firm, a lot of people that had been with Trust Unlimited through Ray Brooks had established bank accounts, and many of them were at Wells Fargo. And what Wells Fargo was doing was they were canceling the accounts every 3 months because of inactivity. People were going back in, had to reestablish their accounts, and it turns out Wells Fargo's was playing a little game because they were getting bonuses for setting up new accounts. They got fined $180 million for that. Another thing.
That's
Wells
exactly.
Fargo did, yeah.
Forgive me, Jim, for breaking in. Forgive me, but that's exactly what happened.
Right.
Within 3 to 6 months, we got a letter stating that account was canceled.
Right.
And they confiscated the money that we'd put in to maintain it. And one of our trustees, at that time, one of our trustees had accounts with Wells Fargo, such as a mortgage, that sort of thing. And so there wasn't any monthly fee assessed on that account. But yet after 3 months, they found that one of the trustees was, and we didn't know this, had a very, very poor credit rating. And so they used that as an excuse, basically, rightfully so, maybe, I don't know, to cancel that account. So we had to go back in with the new trustees to be able to establish a new account with Wells Fargo. And, of course, that was presumably after the fines that took place, and we haven't had any problems with it, and we don't have to send in fees. Now, my sister, we have to send in, we have to pay every month to keep up on the fees that they assess on that particular account.
Right. Well, we could go on infinitum with that, but basically, you and everyone gets the point. There's the trust is not going to be utilized for any reason, so there's no reason to set up a bank account pre-RV. And of course, the Wells Fargo thing was a mess. Now here's the other issue, and it's in the exchange protocol. If an individual goes to Wells Fargo to set up a bank account for a trust that has 10 cents in it, $100 in it, or whatever, obviously they're going to give you a hard time because they don't want to carry an account with $100. But when you walk into a bank, whether it's Wells Fargo or not, and I'm not walking into Wells Fargo unless literally that's the only bank I can do. Literally, I don't care what they're offering. I'm not doing business with them. That's just a personal decision of mine. But whatever bank you walk into, if you walk into a bank and you have 10 million dinar to exchange, you're in control, because all you have to be able to do is look them in the eye when they start giving you a hard time. And as I said, if you get our exchange protocol we outlined, they say, well, I'm just going to another bank. Okay? It's the Jed Clampett effect. It's just that simple. It's not complicated. So anyway, listen, we got a lot of people on the queue here.
I know. I just, forgive me. I have one quick question to close, and it can be easy to answer. We're of the understanding is Tier 4 Bravo that will receive an email, and within that email is a SafeLink website that we go to get the 800 number to be able to call and make our appointments. Now, those appointments will be obviously intuitively at banks. Well, Wells Fargo we've been told by the company that Wells Fargo is one of the only banks that are going to be doing that. Now we're finding Chase, maybe exchanging, or Bank of America. So with that, it still runs in concert, as I would presume with what you're talking about.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, what I was going to say is this. This is everything I'm telling you here is my opinion, but this ain't my first rodeo. I've been through this before.
Right.
There are no contract rates. There may be certain incentives if you put your money in one of their trusts or utilize their asset management division, but there are no such things contract rates. There's not going to be all these special programs you can go into and then you're going to get a better rate. That's not going to happen, all right? If they have an 800 number, it's because they exchange international currencies. They've always had that number. What they're doing is they're trying to corner the market when this thing reinstitutes, all right? So they're saying, oh, gee, we have a group and you're going to get a special rate and you're going to call this number. If you walk into any bank that does currency exchange and you say, I have 10 million dinar, I'd like to exchange it, let me tell you what, that bank's going to drop everything and you are gold to them. So that's not going to happen. You're going to go to the bank. You're going to negotiate your exchange. You're going to try to get the best street rate you can. Now, when the dinar reinstitutes in country, we've already got a list of banks that we're going to call that we know have the computer systems capable of doing not only the exchange of the dinar, but some of the other currencies. We're just going to try to negotiate the lowest possible transaction fee and the highest possible street rate so that any client of ours that walks into that bank with their trust will get that deal. Now, I know that most of the people are going to run to their bank with their hair on fire, so they're going to do the best deal they can. What you have to remember is if you're the one with the currency, you got the gold, you make the rules. If you don't like what they're saying, you very politely pack up and walk out.
Okay.
And
God,
that's the simplest way I can explain it.
Yeah, well, that's awesome because, I'll tell you straight out, my friend, you're a godsend because what we've done is contrary. Horses are already out of the barn, but what I can see is, to curtail that problem, well, we can cancel. I think we can go in.
Let's say the reinstitution happened today. We get off the phone and the dinar reinstitutes. All right, and you make a decision, you're going to XYZ Bank to do your exchange. Well, you just cancel the account at ABC Bank that you had, just close it. And when you go to the bank and they ask you, just say there's nothing in the trust. I have no bank accounts. I have no investment accounts. They don't even know about the sub-trust. If you read the exchange, the only thing you're taking with you is the master trust and the 3 required bank docs. That's all you're taking in there. Nothing else goes in there. And it's none of their business. Now, what Wells Fargo did is they wanted to take a copy of the whole trust and give it to their legal department. If they said that, I say, I'll see you. I'm out of here. I'm not doing that. Or they want to put it in a personal account and transfer it to your trust account after their legal department's done their 2 or 3 weeks of homework. Well, you messed up because now you have possession of it.
Right.
So, it's not
so
about
intuitively, what we can do is cancel those have our trustees cancel the accounts. Period. Close it out. You're clean. Now, if with our credit union, we can keep it because we're going to only use that to transfer money from the initial exchange. And
like I said, I don't think the bank account is a deal breaker. I just think it complicates things because they're going to get real squirrely on you. For example, they might say, well, he's going to move the money to his this account, so we're going to put a 21-day hold on his money, so at least we'll make float on his $10 million. That's the other issue in the exchange protocol. If they give you a 10 or 21, they say, no, I don't want to hold on my money. I'm going somewhere else. You tell them that up front. I don't want to hold on my money. I understand I have 10 million dinar. If it's a 1-to-1, I know I can't have $10 million. But don't tell me you got a 21-day hold on my $10 million. That's not banking law. In other words, you're getting away. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it's midnight banking, as we know about, and it's not being fiduciary. That's not being fiduciary. So, okay, I'll let you go. Thank you, my friend. Okay. I appreciate it. Sure. I've got other questions, so I'm going to probably endeavor to bother because I got to try to get this all this mess cleaned up prior to.
Well, listen, let me go and we'll talk. I'll get back in touch with you. You send me the email. We'll work it all out. Okay.
Okay, thank you, brother.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Okay, next caller is area code 619. That's 619. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Jim. It's Eddie. How are you?
Hey, Eddie. How you doing?
Excellent, my friend. 2 quick questions. First off, let's go to the gift trust scenario, okay?
All right.
I know, let's just say I buy an RV. I got it. I want to put it in the gift trust. I call you guys. You guys set up that trust.
Whoa. Hold on. Stop right there. The gift trust is only for currency. It's not for other tangible assets.
That's right. Forgive me. I know better than that. So now I have a son that I want to gift $1 million to, okay? I will control it. The trust will control it. My question is this. I don't need to set up a separate EIN number for that particular gift trust come tax time and things of that nature?
Okay, let me explain how the gift trust works.
Sure.
You have a master trust, you have a gift subtrust, and you have the standard subtrusts. The master trust has authority over the standard subtrust, so that EIN number is good for the master trust and all of the standard subtrusts. You need a separate EIN number for the gift subtrust because you are not the beneficiary of that subtrust. You are the settler/trustee of that trust in order to gift post-RV USD to other persons. So you need an EIN for the master trust and you need an EIN for the gift subtrust because the gift subtrust has a different trustee. You are the trustee of that. If you read the exchange protocol, as I say, you go to the bank with your master trust and the required bank documents, those 3 documents, negotiate your exchange, create the master trust bank account, put all the USD in the master trust bank account, make sure the deposit slip doesn't have a 10 or 21 day hold on it, and get out of that bank and leave the premises. You come back later with your gift subtrust, and you will establish accounts for each of the individuals within that gift subtrust. You will transfer the USD to those individual accounts. If you said $1 million to your son, if you had 3 sons and you gave them each $1 million, you'd have 3 separate accounts with $1 million in each of those. You are then, as the trustee settler of the package / trustee of that one trust, manage, invest, and distribute that money to those 3 sons as you wish.
Excellent explanation, Jim. Thank you. Last question. As a friend has other trusts, not asset protection trusts, other trusts, revocable trusts, things of that nature. Let's say post-RV, for the purpose of this digital currency scenario. If she transferred assets from those trusts into the Trust Unlimited Trust, would that be considered a taxable event at that time to the original trust?
That would depend. Now it's getting a little complicated. It depends on what the assets are. In some states, for example, the transfer of property would trigger a taxable event. What would have to happen is she'd have to sit down and say, okay, I got this trust that I've established 10 years ago, and I have this asset protection trust for my currencies. The thing's revalued. That trust is now funded. Now, I'll give you a better example myself. I happen to have a revocable trust, and my estate, my wealth are in that trust. I've also created our Trust Unlimited Trust for my currencies. Now, after the revaluation, and I've conducted my exchange and I have my USD in my master trust bank account, then I have to make a decision. Everything else I own is in that revocable trust. I'm either going to sell it, give it away, or transfer it to the Trust Unlimited Trust. But I will have to determine what the tax implications are for the assets that I want to transfer. If it's something that I don't want to do, then I'll just leave it outside of the trust, or or give it away philanthropically. I'll have to figure out how that works. But you have to establish our trust for the currencies because this is your new beginning, and you want to separate this from whatever else has been going on in the past. And to the extent you move anything from the past into our trust, you first have to determine what the tax implications are for the transfer. Then we're getting into offshore stuff too, and there's other things that we may need to do depending upon if things go south with the central bank digital currency. I have a feeling we're going to be able to circumvent it, but if things go south, we're going to have to start to incorporate offshore things, even purchasing other currencies, getting outside of the SWIFT system. I mean, depending upon how much wealth you have. I mean, we have one client, I don't have to give you his name, but he has 500 million dinar and 500 million dong. So that guy has got a lot of wealth to protect if this thing pops, even at $1, you know. So we're just going to have to see how all this plays out.
If I can add one last scenario to that example, let's say she's got $5 million in the old existing trust. She transfers it into the Trust Unlimited trust, and then she's sued at that time. So the original monies of the $5 million, would then they have access to the $5 million potentially,
Probably,
or not?
Scenario. If she basically the way the law would work is the money would be protected if it was in trust prior to the civil suit and prior to a reasonable person knowing a civil suit might be likely. In other words, not just if there's a suit, but in anticipation of a suit. Kind of a reasonable man argument. Well, you know, this guy's been threatening to sue you, so you knew it was a possibility. You know, so again, things need to be tweaked. Every situation, right now, it's cookie cutter. You set up the trust, you assign your currencies. Post-RV, everyone's going in a different direction. Different family, different objectives, different wealth, different liabilities. So then it's going to have to be a one individual situation.
Thank you, Jim. You're awesome.
Sure. I appreciate that. Anything else? Can I move on?
That's it.
We good? All right.
We're good.
Okay. Take care, Eddie. Bye-bye.
All right.
Okay, our next caller is area code 405. That's 405. Go ahead.
Hi, Jim. This is Doug in Oklahoma City.
Doug, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I think the most interesting thing that you mentioned in the call today was the affiliation of J.P. Morgan as an intermediary between China and Iraq, which sort of lends me to believe that Chase Bank, J.P. Morgan and Chase are going to be major players in the revaluation. Now,
Bingo.
in the past, there was a time, and it was in the, I'd say 2007 to 2011, maybe that time frame, maybe even up to 13, I'm not sure. But that's where we purchased all our dinars, is through Chase. We would go down to the bank, we would give them an order, and 24 hours later, it would be at the bank in a FedEx envelope. So from the perspective that, they're going to be, maybe one of the players, I think they're going to be the player, the most significant player. So from that point, what's your opinion on how this is going to go down as far as, is there going to be, I have this question and a couple others, that is there going to be a singular bank that's going to be sort of calling the shots on everything else that's going to be happening with the other major players, other major banks in the U.S.?
Well, first, it's interesting that J.P. Morgan Chase, for a number of years there, were not even exchanging dinar because they said it was a non-functional currency. So that right there tells you they went from you couldn't go in there for a few years to exchange or to purchase currency, and now they're going to be the intermediary for balance of payments between China and Iraq. Obviously, what's changed? What's changed is that the Iraqi dinar is going to be a functional global currency. There's no other explanation for that. So that's good news right there. What was the rest of your question? I'm sorry, I was kind of stuck on that.
Just that you think that they are going to be the number one player for the large banks in the U.S.
I don't know if they're going to be the number one player. They're probably going to be the number one player, but the important thing is the United States is going to be the number one player when it comes to balance of payments with China. You know, Iran is descending in power, but China is ascending in power. China may be the only country in the world that has trade relations with every other country in the world. They are, you know, look what they're doing in the United States. I mean, they're buying off our politicians. They're floating balloons over the country. You know, they've got a massive trade deficit with us. You know, so this is really good news that an American bank is sort of going to be involved to make sure that China is not the new Iran when it comes to pilfering Iraq.
Very good. I have a comment about the comments that everybody has about 800 numbers. You know, we started in this in 2005, and there were many sources of information that were supposedly available to you. There was Shotgun Susie, there was Roll Club, there was everything. All of this 800 numbers started by somebody just commenting on it way back when. Somehow this presumption that the 800 numbers are going to be the established way that people exchange got started, and it got its own legs. So from the perspective that this is an ironclad way that this is going to happen, I've never thought that the 800 numbers were going to be, you know, disseminated so everybody would call in and get in line and all that kind of stuff. I think from the perspective that it's not going to be any different than if you come back from a foreign country and you've got $10,000 worth of their currency and you want to exchange it back to the U.S. currency, you just walk into the bank and you say, I've got this and I want to make an exchange. That's my opinion. I've never believed that these 800 numbers had any weight to them.
Well, like I said on the call, any bank or financial organization that does currency exchanges already has an 800 number, so there's not a special number. This was not. We had a group that came to us to establish trusts. We established trusts for them, and then they got hysterical. They called us up. They lost their currency. Well, what do you mean you lost your currency? Evidently, it was a group, and they gave their currency to some group in Reno, physically gave them physical possession of the currency so that they could participate in the quote-unquote contract rates. And, of course, the people disappeared with their currency.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, it's the greed factor. It just is. You know, I mean, say to people, if you have 10 million dinar, you pay $10,000 for the dinar, and they give you one, and you get $10 million, thank Jesus, pay your taxes, invest wisely. You know, but it's just, it's exactly. Unfortunate. You know, so, you know, that's where we find ourselves. So I just try to tell people, avoid the pie in the sky stuff. All right, it's already people think it's pie in the sky that you could buy $1 million dinar for $1,000 and then it would be worth $1 million. And I understand why people say that. That's why I say this is something that's never happened before. It's never going to happen again. It's the strangest confluence of events. The fact that Iraq was invaded, the fact that the United States, not invaded, but that Iraq was overrun by the Sunni regime as they were kicked out, that the currency went to a program rate, that people were able through 13303 to invest and rebuild the country. Then we're transitioning because of Basel compliance from fiat-based to commodity-based currencies, and it happens to be a country that's one of the richest in the world per square mile. All of these things came to, you know, it's just an equation that's never existed before. So that's why we're fortunate we find ourselves in this position. So, I mean, honestly, if someone called me right now and said, Jim, I'll give you $2 for all your dinar right now. Honestly, I don't know that I would say no. I'd actually have to think about that before I answered him, because I know I paid nothing for it, and I'm guaranteed. You know, so yeah, I guess the greedy part of me, the next day it revalues and he gets $3.40, and I immediately, I had to do the differential. But that's what money does. It's money's not evil. It's the love of money. It perverts our thinking. You can tell a lot about people by the way they spend. So it is what it is.
Last question. The protection of the gain on the dinars is one of the most important facets of the trust. Is that correct? In that, if the asset is in the trust prior to and then after the revaluation, the gain on that, if it remains in the trust, and if the IRS and the Treasury follow their own codes, it will be tax deferred. Is that correct?
Okay. Section 988 E2 of the Internal Revenue Code refers to the exchange of the currency as capital gain. The only way it can be capital gain is if it's a capital asset. If it's a capital asset, it's in trust. The asset, the gain pursuant to Section 643A and B should be tax deferred, meaning as long as it remains in trust, it's not taxed. If it comes out of the trust, it's taxed. Right. So then we have the issue of, but as we've said, that's the way we read it. But when the currency reinstitutes, we're sending a letter to the Treasury to ask them to confirm our understanding of Section 643A and B. Let's say they decline to respond, or they come back and say, no, that's not how we interpret it. Or if we have to pay the tax before we get an answer from them, then we have to pay the tax and immediately submit simultaneously a letter requesting a refund based on 643A and B. But our reading is it's tax deferred. But let's look at the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is that it's ordinary income. I don't see how they can do that, because this isn't a currency arbitrage. This isn't a currency option. We have physical possession of the currency, so I don't see how they can go there. But when in doubt, we have to pay the highest tax, because if we don't, we have to then pay the unpaid portion plus 100% penalty plus interest. If it's an ordinary income, it wipes you out completely. So yeah. That's another reason why we want this to happen early in a quarter, in the first half of a quarter, which gives us time to compel the Treasury Department and the IRS to respond. Without that, we have to treat it as ordinary income. Because we're risking, like I said, 100% penalty.
Well, the key word is compel. Do they have to have it within a certain time frame so that it falls within a tax order?
Yes. It has to be paid by the 15th of the first month of the next quarter, which is why, like I said, if we get an RV in the first 6 weeks of a quarter, that means we have 60 days until the tax man has to be paid. That gives us enough time to compel the IRS to respond. It also gives us a legitimate legal argument if we have to go to court, if they drag their feet to mess with us. And this bunch in Washington, I absolutely do not trust these people. I vacillate. Are they mind-numbingly stupid? Are they nefarious? Or are they some combination of the two? But I'm 71. I'm going to be 71 years old. I have never in my life seen a bunch like this. They are the absolute worst. I don't know how they sleep at night, and I don't know how the media can continue to carry their water.
Taking enough of your time. Thank you so much. Hopefully something will happen between now and actually by the time this next week is over, we're past the midway point. If this were to happen, it would actually be beneficial if it didn't happen until after the 1st of April. That way we'd have till July 15th.
Yeah, whenever I get to the last 30 days of a quarter, I say just bump it to the next quarter. I mean, the difference is night and day. We can exchange it when we want. We don't have to. If it comes out of the low float, we don't have to exchange it to pay a tax we might not even owe. So, I remember at the end, some of the gurus, it's December and they're praying that the thing pops. I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. You're a guru of what? You may think you understand currency, but do you understand taxation? Of course, a lot of the gurus are also saying it's not a taxable event. Well, some of them are going to jail. You can't tell people that.
Oh gosh, that'd be awful.
Well, we ran off a lot of our competition because I got them on the phone and I said, you keep saying that you're going to jail after we sue you. You can't say things like that. Another thing people were saying is, well, the reason Trust Unlimited has a Wyoming trust is because it's a non-tax jurisdiction, and you don't have to pay federal or state taxes. Don't ever say something like that and ascribe that to us. We use Wyoming for asset protection reasons, not for tax reasons. And there are 8 states in this country, 8 states that you have to pay state taxes no matter. I don't care if you got the money invested in camel farms in Tunisia, you're going to pay taxes on the profit, state taxes, if you live in that state. So you know what you're talking about. And they're actually putting that stuff out there. They're going to jail.
Gosh. Well, thank you so much. On to the next question from somebody. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah, you're the last guy. You take care, Doug.
Oh, okay.
You got me on a rant there. When I think of some of the things people are saying, and people call, I like to talk to that guru, Jim Shore, say, I'm not a guru. I'm not a snake charmer. I don't do any of that stuff. Take care, Doug.
It's been such a long time, and there have been so many people. I mean, if I went back and listened to all the people that have stated, and I remember the big Reno debacle. Oh my gosh, they had people that were actually sitting in a hotel room that had a view of the airport because there were supposed to be planes landing and going into hangars secretly to make.
That's right. I forgot about that. Oh my God, That's right. Well, how about the gurus that were in a 5-day window for like 10 years? It's like, it's popping next Tuesday. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, they had a guy that was on there, and he and his wife had been set up, and they were being funded. They stayed in a hotel overlooking the runway for 19 months.
Oh my God.
19 months.
Oh my God. See, this is what money does to people. This is what it breaks them down rationally. I mean, it's we get calls all the time to be on people's websites, to go to Dinar, and we don't. No, we're not. But you'll get exposure. More people. No, we're not, because we're not gurus. We're not doing that. That's not who we are. And it is what it is.
Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye, Doug. Okay, another caller came in that rant, area code 808. We got someone from Hawaii, I'm guessing.
Yes, you do. It's Daisy.
Daisy, how are you doing?
Wonderful. I have a question as to one of your callers that had this. He's in a trust that's not the trust we're all in. Question. I'm just curious because I've heard that a few times. Why and how or if he can drop the other trust he's in and get into yours? Is that a possibility?
You can have 500 trusts. The only trust that matters is the one you funded. It doesn't matter. You can have 10 cars. The only one that matters is the one you drive. The one's got an engine. Okay. There's nothing in the trust. It doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm just curious as to some of these people that listen to you all the time and still go off on their own. But I know it's because they have their own mind and what we call our own choices.
A lot of these people established trust long before they heard of Trust Unlimited or Jim George. They were just coming along, and someone called them up and said, hey, you know what, I heard this guy, Jim George, and, I never quite understood it. This guy, you'll listen to him, he explains it well. But they have a trust with another company. Some of that happens. But you have no idea how many people have said to us, hey, you know what, I just purchased a trust from XYZ, blah, blah, but I really want to work with your guys. That's one of the reasons we set up the deferred payment arrangement to help people that just shelled out. People have sent me copies of trust that they paid $5,000 for. It's 12 pages long. I wouldn't line my birdcage with it. It's unfortunate what happens to people. It's our trust is the cheapest one out there, I believe. I don't think any trust is $2,500 up front. Some of them are $3,000.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. And ours, like I said, I've been doing this for 40 years. There's our trust, and then there's everything else. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I honestly believe this is the smartest place to be if you want all the protection that you provide. Just was curious about that. You have a great day.
You too. Take care. Take care, Daisy.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, Daisy was our last caller. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call and some of my rants today. But if the things we've discussed are of interest to you, I strongly suggest you contact us to get our initial no-obligation package. You're under no obligation by doing so. It does contain everything you need if you wish to proceed, but again, you're under no obligation to do so. Review the package. You can contact us by phone or email if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you in every way, and there will be no consultation fee. Of course, our next call is next Wednesday. Certainly, if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we'll be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and have a great week. Bye-bye.